All right, online MBA students at Cal State San Bernardino, are you ready for Entrepreneurship 621? Ready or not, we're taking off. This is Mike Stoll. I'm going to be your instructor for the next 5 weeks, and I'm really excited to be working with you. Entrepreneurship 621 is one of my favorite courses that I've taught in my time at Cal State over the last 14, 15 years. And this is my third time teaching it online. I have a long history with this class. I've been teaching this class since I arrived at Cal State. In fact, this was the very first MBA class we offered in entrepreneurship way back in 2001. And I've had a long journey with this class. I've seen it evolve over time. The initial design and all subsequent designs of the course have been my handiwork. And it's been primarily a face-to-face class up until a few years back when we were asked to bring it into the online domain. I'll be upfront. I had some reservations about trying to teach entrepreneurship online, entrepreneurship education, when it's done right, when it's done well, is a highly experiential process. And I really in general, had some reservations about online education, but in particular, had reservations about how we could translate entrepreneurship into the online domain. So much of what we do in the entrepreneurship classes is hands-on, interactive, experiential, and that makes it a little bit challenging in the online domain. But that said, I also felt that perhaps I was being a little, too reserved, and I really being able to judge whether it was an effective way of delivering material. I had to jump in and test it out and try it. It's easy to sit on the sidelines and basically say, well, that's not going to work. And for me, I felt it was appropriate to jump in and see what it would be like to teach it online. And so far, the experience has actually been pretty good. I don't think I can ever teach this the way I teach it face-to-face. And this online section is an attempt to mimic some of that, but there's just so many things we do in the face-to-face section of this course that is almost impossible, if not impossible, to replicate online, but I try my best to introduce some of that into the process. One of the things I try to do is make this somewhat personalized, and so during this course, you're going to hear from me in each of what I call experiences, each of the modules, so to speak. You'll hear from me personally so that there's some interaction there, and then I try and be as engaged as possible throughout the entire course in responding and be participating in discussions and those kind of things. So I try to mimic the face-to-face as much as I can. This class is a basic overview. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as I go through this basically orientation. This is kind of a setting the stage piece before you get started on the substantive work of the course. I mentioned earlier this is one of my favorite classes to teach, and the feedback we've gotten from students over the years, including the online students, is that this is one of their favorite classes to take in the entrepreneurship program. And that includes both entrepreneurship-focused students as well as students that are taking it as an elective. For you online MBA students, you're all taking this as an elective. And so, it will be interesting to see how you engage in the class, because some people have a really strong interest in entrepreneurship and others really don't. I'm thinking a few of our online students, last time I taught this, had almost no interest in entrepreneurship. They were simply taking the class because they needed to get a class so that they could graduate. And my hope is that if you happen to be in that situation, that you enter this course with an open mind and are open to the experience and see what this class will bring you. The one thing I am proud about with this class is that it tends to give you a pretty good snapshot of what entrepreneurship is, and it also gives you a snapshot into where you stand in the entrepreneurial domain. And I think it's a valuable class, and even if you're not sure about it, I think having the patience and sort of going along for the ride and seeing how it turns out can pay dividends. And I'm thinking to this last term when I taught the face-to-face Entrepreneurship 621 course. I learned at the end of the course that two of the students in the course who were taking it as an elective had serious doubts about the class in the early stages because of the nature of the material, the nature of the workload, the non-traditional nature of the class, highly interactive. I'm going to talk more about that as we step through this introduction. And they expressed to me at the end of the class that they were very, very close to dropping the class. But they decided to stick with it, and they shared in their learning reflections, and they shared this with the class, that they felt that sticking with it was an incredibly great decision because it ended up being one of the best classes they've ever taken. And they felt they really gained personally from sticking with it and going through the material. And in one case, one of the students says, I know I'll never be an entrepreneur, but this is incredibly valuable information that I can use in my career. So I think that from that perspective, the class has a lot of value. And so this orientation, this setting of the stage, has a particular purpose, and I'm going to kind of take you through that step by step. Okay, so this introduction for Entrepreneurship 621 is really meant to give you a sense of the objective of the course. Why is this course valuable, and basically what you'll be getting out of it. Maybe I should say what we'll be getting out of it, because I think in every course I've taught, I've always taken something away from the experience that's added to my knowledge base by interacting with the students, by topics, questions that have been brought up that have forced me to dig deeper. So I think that's there's a valuable part of that process for both the student and the instructor, what we'll be learning in the process. I'm going to go over how you're going to be learning, the structure and the process of this course. As I mentioned previously, entrepreneurship as an educational approach tends to be highly experiential, and so I'm trying to include some of that in this particular online class, and in some ways this class mimics the face-to-face in terms of discussions are driven by students and I'm providing input, but we'll kind of cover that in a little bit more detail as we step through this introduction. Talk a little bit about the limitations of the course. Online education, both online and face-to-face, have limitations, and it's I think the key is understanding what those limitations are and addressing them, and trying to find ways to overcome whatever inherent limitations are in the delivery method for the knowledge you're trying to impart. Talk a little bit about my expectations for the course. What I expect of myself when I teach a class, what I expect of the students when I teach a class, and what expectations for the learning that's going to take place. And then talk a little bit about the discussions and the takeaways, which are a really significant component of the class, and what those are and why I do those. So that's pretty much what we're going to cover for the remaining 20 minutes or so that I've got you online here for this introduction piece. And last but not least, going to talk a little bit about my background and experience and how that relates to this particular class, and perhaps even to a greater degree the entrepreneurship program at Cal State San Bernardino. One of the more direct questions I received from a student in years past in teaching. It was actually an undergrad student. Very first session, we did a couple of experiential things to open the class, and then I sort of turned it over to the students and said, so you're going to be dealing with me for the next 10 weeks. What do you want to know about me? And a student raised his hand and basically said, what makes you qualified to teach this class? And I thought it was a great question, and that gave me an opportunity to delineate where I'm coming from, why I'm doing what I'm doing, and how my own personal background plays into the process. So last but not least, I'll give you a little bit of insight into who I am and why I'm teaching this class. So the primary objective of the class is really to give you a sense of who entrepreneurs are and what they actually do and what entrepreneurship really is. And if you see this little job announcement, I always found this funny. for the wanted entrepreneur. It's somebody who's seeking an exciting, exhausting, high-risk position. Realistically, the word entrepreneur means different things to different people. It's gotten so popular in our culture that in some sense it's lost some of its meaning. And there's many connotations, there's some loaded meanings to the word entrepreneur. Some definitions are not entirely accurate. And one of the things that I want to do, or I hope that you leave this class understanding, is who entrepreneurs are as people. What do they do that makes them entrepreneurs? And perhaps even to some degree, why do they do what they do? It's a really interesting, journey into kind of trying to figure out what these people do. And maybe some of you are entrepreneurs. I don't know. I will learn that as we go through the process. But I think it's really important that we have a sense of defining who entrepreneurs are. And so we're all on the same page. Defining what entrepreneurship is and figuring out how this all fits for you. And where that's important, I think, is that many students that take this class, particularly in the online MBA program, are not aspiring to be entrepreneurs. But I would argue that there's a real strong value in being entrepreneurial. And that doesn't necessarily mean that people have to be entrepreneurs that start a new business venture of their own. It also means that entrepreneurial people do things that are unique and innovative and have some risk involved and create value. And so that's one of the things we want to explore in this class, is this idea of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial behavior and what context means for all this. I'm a big believer, as you'll see as the class progresses, that this whole idea of entrepreneurship has it's not driven by context. Context is almost not important. That you can be entrepreneurial in multiple domains. I think actually when students have pressed me on this, I've used myself as an example because I've been an entrepreneur in the for-profit context. I've been an entrepreneur in the nonprofit context. And I've been an entrepreneur or entrepreneurial in the sort of government educational space here at Cal State San Bernardino. I'm not any different than I was 25 years ago. Older, wiser, more experienced, less hair, maybe a few more pounds, but fundamentally not a different person. I don't do things any differently than I did running a company versus running programs here at Cal State San Bernardino. And so that informs my worldview that this whole idea of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial doesn't have a context, and that we can be entrepreneurial in any context and make a huge difference in creating value for organizations, for society, for people of our community. So it's a really interesting thing. But overall, the objective is you should walk out of this class with a solid, rock solid understanding of who entrepreneurs are, what they do that makes them entrepreneurial, and the processes that are involved in creating new ventures, whether it's their own new venture or a corporate related venture or a venture inside of a nonprofit organization, doesn't matter. And ultimately, some of the pieces of the puzzle that make all that come together. The risk-taking, the innovation, the creativity, the ideation, the passion, the determination, the enthusiasm, the cognitive ability of entrepreneurs, all that stuff's got to come together in this class. And hopefully you walk out really feeling good about that. Okay, let's take a quick look at the topics that we're going to cover in the class. There's actually 5 major topic areas, and I'm going to briefly take you through them. Basically, each week we're covering a different topic area, and those topics are starting with who are entrepreneurs. So basically, who are entrepreneurs and what do they do? How do we know that they're entrepreneurs? So a big part of this class, too, is also learning how you fit into this idea of who entrepreneurs are. So we're going to look at what kind of characteristics they have, what kind of traits do they have, what kind of behaviors do they engage in, how do they think, how do they view the world, and then from the lens of both readings and videos, try and make sense of all that, but also through some of the projects you do in this class, it'll give you a chance to reflect on how much of an entrepreneur are you based on what we know about who entrepreneurs are. Second piece of the puzzle is this, every business starts as an idea. So we talk about ideas and business opportunities. And from my experience at Cal State San Bernardino, I come into contact with tons of students, and when I ask them, what kind of business do you want to start? Probably at least 80% of those students have no idea what kind of business they want to start. They just know that they want to be an entrepreneur, they want to own their own business, and they haven't gotten that far yet. So, and I think that's pretty common. A lot of people have this vague notion that they want to be a business owner, but they haven't thought any further than that. And so in this particular class, we're going to explore ideation, creativity, how do you come up, where do business ideas come from, and then how do we know whether those businesses are opportunities? What kind of process, what kind of things can we do to understand whether the ideas we come up with represent a true business opportunity? Now, entrepreneurs are people, and they come up with ideas, and they do something. They start a business, they take action. And so the third component that we're going to look at in this course is the entrepreneurial process. What does that process look like? The graphic you're seeing on the screen right now is the representation of the lean models approach, the lean startup approach, which is called build, measure, learn. So there are multiple ways to conceptualize the startup process, and I'm going to expose you to those startup models and the process and models that encapsulate what happens when entrepreneurs come up with ideas and take actions to start businesses. So you're going to learn about the entrepreneurial process. The fourth component is this idea of resources. Every business starts, has to have some kind of resources. And the most common, when I talk to people about starting a business, they say, I need X amount of capital. And I always say, well, that's good. But what else do you need? Because we try and introduce resources as a broad concept that encapsulates more than just money. And last but not least, every business has an endpoint, whether it wants to or not. And so we engage in this discussion of exit strategy. Should entrepreneurs have an exit strategy? And if so, what does that mean? And so at that point, we also, since that's the final experience in the class in week 5, we also take that opportunity to do some integrative discussion about what we learned through the entire process about who entrepreneurs are, where do they come up with ideas, how do they know they're any good, what's the process they use to start their businesses, what kind of resources are involved. We kind of encapsulate the course in that final experience by talking about exit strategies, but also about what does this all mean? So that's essentially the 5 major topic areas that we cover in this introductory course. And I want to, stress that that's not everything about entrepreneurship, but that's the major components that we can cover in an introductory course. Now, a little bit about the structure and the process of this online class. You're going through the introduction piece right now, plus you're going to have, for each week, you're going to have what I call experiences. That's the materials, the readings, the videos, the projects. That's everything that encapsulates your experience in this class. Since it's a 5-week class, we break it up into 5 experiences. You could call them modules, phases, whatever you want, but I like the word experiences because that's what this class is. It's experiencing entrepreneurship. And so you're going to go through this step-by-step 5 experiences, as I said, plus this introduction. Throughout the course of the project, in addition to the readings, the videos, and those kind of things, you're going to be doing projects. Now, typically this class has 5 major projects, but after I taught this class the last time online, and kind of collaborating with the students and talking with some of the students, there was a consensus that maybe 5 projects was too much for a 5-week compressed timeline. And I think that was a good observation. I kind of felt it myself in watching the students navigate some of the projects. So this time we have 4 projects that you're going to go through. These are not in any particular order. Now, one is the personal entrepreneurial discovery. This is a project that forces you to kind of examine yourself within the context of what does it mean to be an entrepreneur and who entrepreneurs are. You're going to get exposed to some questions, some probing questions. You're going to take some personal assessments that look at your traits and characteristics and your confidence level of being an entrepreneur. And you're going to try and bring this all together in some kind of a reflection project that allows you to assess what you've learned about yourself as a potential entrepreneur. Since I mentioned that every business starts as an idea, we're going to go through some idea generation exercises. These are relatively concise and they're much more compact than, say, what I use for my typical MBA class or for my undergraduate class. In my undergraduate class, students have to come up with, to start, the very first exercise, they have to come up with 100. Now, you're not going to do that, so don't freak out. But I am going to force you to go through 3 separate idea generation exercises. And some of you are going to go, oh, I love this. This is awesome. Some people are going to go, ideas are hard for me. This is tough. It's challenging. That's good. You'll make it through, I promise, and you'll get something out of it. So the idea generation exercises will get you thinking about what ideas can I come up with based on where we know business ideas come from. And you'll get exposed to that in the readings and the videos. The third project is the business model canvas. Basically, that takes a look at the major components of a business concept and tries to delineate them and determine whether the business concept that you've come up with is any good. So you can come up with lots of ideas, but how do you know if they're any good? Well, the business model canvas gives us that first step to start delineating whether we've got something. And it forces us to look at the value proposition, how we would get the product to market, what's our business, what's our real business model, how do we make money, what are the major costs, what are our partners, that kind of stuff. So it really starts to take something that looks really simple on the surface and make it very complex, but also very delineated so you can tell whether you've got something. Last but not least on the projects is the reflective project. Now, one of the things I'm big on is trying to learn as much as possible and then tying a big bow on top of it at the very end. So the reflective project forces you, I ask you, to think about your entire experience in the class and what did you learn from that experience and how can you take that experience and use it in the future. And really that kind of entails some short reflection and, looking at yourself from the top 10 takeaways of the class. This is not a written paper. It's actually, I want you to exercise creativity and be unique, and you can do it in the form of a song, a video. I used to have them be written projects. They're boring. I don't like doing that. So you have to exercise your creativity and do something unique and creative, and demonstrate what you learned in the class in a really different way. The most unique thing I had, I think, last term was a animated comic strip, and we also had a script that was written for a TV show that demonstrated the top 10 takeaways from the class for that particular person. So it's a good way to kind of wrap up the class and reflect back on all the experiences you had and what does that mean for you. Okay, in terms of the expectations and potential limitations of the course, starting with, the course is really fast-paced, 5 weeks, man, it's compressed. And it requires you to really be engaged and take charge of the learning process. And, you really, really have to not fall behind and really stay on point. I don't think there's any other way to say it. You really got to be there, present, engaged, and take charge of the learning process. Don't sit back. The way I teach is not to just throw material at you. You've got to go through the material, understand it, demonstrate that understanding, discuss it, and make sense of it. I want to caution you too that even though this course can be very impactful, it's not designed to turn you into an entrepreneur, nor is it a comprehensive class. It's an introductory class. It's a teaser. It's a Twitter class, basically, of what entrepreneurship is. MBA students take 5 classes in entrepreneurship to understand the concept fully. And even then, it's not enough. We'd love to have more than that. In fact, we're working on a Master of Science in Entrepreneurship that will be, most all of the classes will be focused on entrepreneurship, so they'll get even more. So it's not designed to turn you into an entrepreneur. I'm not trying to convert people, although I want to expose you to the process. I hope it catches with you. I hope you get enthusiastic about it. But at the end of the day, I just want you to be able to know more about entrepreneurship, speak intelligently about entrepreneurship, and also understand where you stand in the entrepreneurial process and where you stand as a potential entrepreneur. Again, I'll say it again, I'm not trying to convert you, although it may seem that way at times because I'm passionate and enthusiastic and geeked about this whole subject of entrepreneurship. I'm not trying to turn you into an entrepreneur, but I do want you to know what entrepreneurship's about, and it's only the first step. So if you want to learn more, if you're really enthusiastic, excited about it, engaged, more classes, not less. Entrepreneurship education, the way we do it, is very experiential, and I will tell you right now, it's very difficult to translate that to the online format. As an example, the regular MBA students that take this class have to do the immersion project, which is starting a business and running it for 10 weeks. That's incredibly difficult to do, and it's hard to do. It's a monumental challenge to do in 10 weeks. It's an impossible thing to do in 5 weeks. And it's even harder to do it online because we're not getting that face-to-face constant interaction where I can support and coach and mentor the students as they go through that process. It's really, really difficult. So as much as I would like this to be as experiential as my face-to-face class, it's not there yet. I'm still ideating, thinking on how we can do it. In this class, I want you to put your primary emphasis on learning. If you do, everything else should take care of itself. I really think this, in the scheme of our entrepreneurship program, this is actually the easiest class we teach. They get progressively harder, and the grades become harder to get the highest level grade as we step through the program. But that said, I want you to focus on learning first. If you don't learn it, if you don't remember it, you can't use it in the future. And I'm going to talk about that in the context of learning takeaways here in just a minute. But so focus on learning the material, not just checking the box, not just saying, done, I got it, I'm through, I'm moving on to the next thing. Focus on learning and soaking up as much as you can. And lastly, think like an owner. What that means is you engage, you take action, you take responsibility, and think like an owner. Don't think like an employee. Don't think like a student, a typical student. Think like an owner. Owners think of everything. They're proactive. They take initiative. They don't wait for things to happen. They don't let questions go unresolved. If they're not sure about something, they get clarification. They seek out the answer. In the context of this class, especially since it's an online class, I think that becomes paramount. It's important no matter what class I teach. But particularly this class, you got to think like an owner because it is an entrepreneurship class. We want you to start thinking like entrepreneurs do. Okay, this class is nearly identical to my face-to-face class from the perspective of discussions. I don't lecture. I basically provide background information, which is your prep materials, all the readings, the videos, any exercises, any projects you're working on. I provide that as the foundational elements, and then we come together and discuss those in detail to make sure we understand really key concepts. And I'm a participant in that process. And at times I may lead it, but I prefer to be a participant. So thinking like an owner, you guys dive in, you soak up the material, you dissect it, you come up with questions, insightful comments, and we come together and discuss. And we do that in each of the experiences. We have typically two discussion questions in each experience of the course, each week of the course. And you dive in and you discuss those, and I'm in there with you. This is not something where I'm just kind of monitoring the discussion. I actually will come in where appropriate. I'm not going to respond to every response, but where appropriate, I'm going to come in and respond to the responses and clarify. And if somebody's going off in a different direction, or if I think I don't know that that's accurate, or here's another way of thinking about it, I'm going to come in and let my opinion be known. In that sense, I'm a participant and you will drive the process. I always tell my face-to-face classes, we come in, we discuss, I'm a facilitator, and if you guys aren't ready to discuss, the class dies, basically. If you're not prepared, the class dies. So from the perspective of my face-to-face class, online is no different from that perspective. The discussion will drive deeper understanding, hopefully, of the material, and I will participate in that process. Now, I mentioned also this paramount focus on learning first. And one of the things we do each of the experiences in this class is what I call learning takeaways. And the concept here is that if you can't remember it, you can't use it, and all this wonderful money you've paid for your education becomes less than efficient if you can't remember what you've been through. So the problem we have as humans is that we have access to sensory, experiences, and we've got to get that into our short-term memory and hopefully ultimately our long-term memory. And so when we're exposed to sensory information, it's got to make that transition. And what the folks that study the brain have found out is that things that go into the short-term memory, if there's no rehearsal, what they call rehearsal, if unrehearsed information gets lost, and if you rehearse information, it gets encoded into your longer-term memory, and then you can retrieve it at future points in time. Now, over time, you're going to lose some of that information. It's just a natural thing. But our goal in learning is to get as much of what we learn in the course from our short-term memory into our long-term memory. And one of those methods is through rehearsal. Rehearsal is a polite way of saying repetition. And so one of the things that I do in all of my classes is that we do learning takeaways. And at the end of each experience, if it's my face-to-face class, it's the end of each class session, the students do a learning takeaway. Now, the learning takeaways are typically 3 to 5 key points that you took out of that session, or in this case, that experience, or you could call it a module, phase, whatever, but I call it experience. Out of that experience, here's the 3 to 5 things that I thought were the most impactful learning points for me. And that may not be the same as your fellow student, but you're still going to do learning takeaways. And the idea is that you want to do those right away. So they have to be done by the end of the experience, by the time the module closes. And hopefully that becomes a rehearsal mechanism to help you remember things better. Now, I'm going anecdotally, but I've been doing this for years, using this method for years, and every student that I've talked to about this have said it actually helps. It really does help them remember concepts. Some of them said it's a lot of work, especially if you're in a 10-week class and you're doing it every class session. That's 20 takeaways. They said it's a lot of work, but it really pays dividends. And I've even had several students, I'm thinking of one right now, who left. He's now running a very successful entrepreneurial venture, but one of his first jobs out of college, he went to the corporate office, got his training, he's doing takeaways, and he said, people were asking him, what are you doing? And he said, I'm doing takeaways. And they said, what's that? And he explained it to him. And so he said, pretty soon everybody was doing the takeaways. He said, I used it. I continued to use it as a concept. And he said, it helped me remember all the stuff that I was having to learn in my corporate training as a manager. So to be able to use something, you've got to remember it. And to remember it, it's got to get into long-term memory. So learning takeaways become very, very important. Okay, so give you a quick background on myself. I'm currently the director of the Center for Entrepreneurship at Cal State San Bernardino. I teach entrepreneurship, obviously. I'm the academic director, so I oversee the academic program in entrepreneurship. And I also serve as the department chair for the management department. So I've got multiple responsibilities, multiple jobs. I'm kind of an idiot that way. And so I'm in constant task saturation mode, which I must like that or something. I'm not sure what's wrong with me. Anyways, I've been at Cal State I started teaching there in 2001, started running the center in 2002, and I'm still at Cal State primarily because I love working with the students and I love what our entrepreneurship program does and continues to do and the potential it has for the future. Now, I got here because I grew up. There's a common thread that runs through my life. It's entrepreneurship. I was one of those kids that started the lemonade stand. I was one of those kids that baked cookies and sold them to my friends in the neighborhood because they were eating the crummy cookies out of the bag. And I had the hot, fresh cookies that I'd learned to bake from my mom. Um, so I grew up around a family business. When I was 5, my parents launched their own business, and that business still exists to this day. Although the family doesn't own it, I think it's been 5 years now since when the family sold out. But I grew up around that from the time I was 5 years old. I worked in that business until my early 30s. I started by sweeping the floors when I was probably 9, 10 years old. I did every job in the business. I ended up helping to, running the business with my father for a number of years. It was a great time. It was an avionics manufacturing firm called Aircom Systems. Had great customers. We did avionics systems. We manufactured them for a wide variety of customers, including the government and private sector, New York Police Department, Drug Enforcement Administration, the military, U.S. Forest Service, California Highway Patrol, all kinds of really great customers. Fun times. At a particular point, I was ready to spread my wings. It's a long story, but family businesses can be a challenge sometimes. And I went off and started doing some consulting, and I ended up running an organization called the Small Business Development Center. And in my time at that organization, we built a great team, doubled it in size, became a national model, won national awards, became the largest small business development center program in the country. This is a program that's funded by the Small Business Administration in large part, and provides counseling and training for people that are already in business, running their own company or seeking to start up a business. Phenomenal program, great times, great team. But when I was there, I got reacquainted with one of my former professors from Cal State San Bernardino. I had gone to school at CSUSB, and he ultimately roped me into coming up to Cal State San Bernardino and running the Center for Entrepreneurship. And basically my task at Cal State San Bernardino was to build the entrepreneurship program. It was actually kind of struggling at the time. And so my task was to come up there and turn it into something significant. And I'm proud to say that myself and our team have built an incredible program. We started with basically myself and a very, very small amount of resources, and have grown it into I think we've got 16, 18 people now working in the center, 5, 6 faculty teaching entrepreneurship now. We went from 16, 18 students to over 300 or close to 300 now. We've won national awards for entrepreneurship education. So I'm very proud of the work we've done at Cal State San Bernardino. And I'll tie it back again. The common thread on all of this is entrepreneurship. Everywhere I've been, whether it's my lemonade stand or the 2 businesses I started in college, or helping run my family's company, or taking over the SBDC and growing that, coming up to Cal State San Bernardino and building the entrepreneurship program, the common thread there is entrepreneurship. Whether I owned the company or not, and in the case of Cal State San Bernardino and the Small Business Development Center program, I didn't own those programs. But the common thread, the common approach was entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial thinking, an entrepreneurial mindset, entrepreneurial behaviors. And it ties back to what I said earlier about context, is that you can be entrepreneurial in any context. And I think my career is a great testament to that. And so, again, I'm passionate about entrepreneurship. It's kind of what drives me. It's what I like to talk about. It's what I like to read about. It's what I like to watch movies about entrepreneurship. It kind of consumes me. And so hopefully you'll get a sense of that passion and enthusiasm as we go through the course. And hopefully you'll learn, and I'll learn from you as well. Okay, let's wrap up this introduction. Hope you've enjoyed kind of stepping through and getting acquainted with the Entrepreneurship 621 class. The next steps for you are to review the syllabus. That's available on Schoology, and you want to take a close look at it and make sure that you completely understand everything that we're going to be doing in this class. And if there's something you're not sure of or clear about, please do not suffer in silence. Please go ahead and reach out, ask questions, make sure that you're clear with the roadmap we're going to be taking in this class. Once you've reviewed the syllabus, you kind of feel comfortable and you've clarified anything that you're not certain of, you want to jump online in Schoology and participate in the brief introductory discussion. That's just a chance for me to get a chance to meet you. I'm sure that some of you have not, many of you have probably had some classes together in the online program, but there's going to be some new folks, and so this is a way for us to kind of get to know each other. If you have a photo, might be nice to post that in there so I can put a face to the name. That's always kind of cool. It actually helps me remember people better. But you can review my bio but go in there and participate in that brief introductory discussion, and then you can go ahead and get started on Experience One. Go ahead and jump in. There's a lot to learn in this class, and I hope you enjoyed as much as I do teaching it. The way I structure things on Schoology is typically the experiences last for a week, so they open on typically the experiences end on a Sunday night, but I'll usually open the next experience. So like Experience 1 is open right now. Experience 2 will open usually on a Thursday night, Thursday or Friday before the current module closes. So like Experience 1 is open now, but usually on Thursday, even though it closes on Sunday, on Thursday I'll open up Experience 2. So those of you that work maybe a little bit faster or want to get a head start can jump into Experience 2 and get working on that. So it gives you a little bit of flexibility. So I'm really looking forward to working with you guys. This is, like I said, this is my third time teaching an online class, and I've learned something each time I've taught it. I was pleasantly surprised the first time I taught it, being somebody who wasn't a big advocate for online education. I thought that in the online classes, the students have a more equal chance to participate. In a class of 28, for example, sometimes it's a challenge to get everybody involved in a discussion in the same class session. But in online, I can accomplish that. I can get everybody's input, which I think is really, really valuable and robust. So I'm looking forward to working with you guys. I'm excited about this. I love teaching. This is, with all the administrative work I do at Cal State San Bernardino, running the Center for Entrepreneurship and Department Chair, this is kind of my refuge, is teaching. As somebody who's been involved in teaching for 15 years now, it's part of my passion. It's something I think I do pretty well, and I'm really excited and looking forward to working with you guys. So go ahead and jump in, get popping, and I will talk to you again in Experience 1.